Nobody told me what my anger was actually about. Not my parents, not any teacher or counsellor, no bit of my life at the time. Nobody looked at the anger and tried to understand what was underneath it. They either responded to it or they learned to step around it. Because by that point, I'd gotten good at keeping the worst of it out of sight. I want to talk about that today. Because if you're the kind of person who gets wound up over things that don't warrant it, who snaps at people and feels like something is wrong with you, or has this constant low level heat and you can't explain and can't turn it off, this video is for you. And I think there's a lot more of you out there watching this that probably don't realize it. There's a version of depression that everyone knows. The version that looks sad, the person who can't get out of bed, who withdraws, who goes quiet, who stops eating. That's the awareness campaign version, the one that comes down with the poster and the helpline at the bottom. We've all seen them. That's a real version, I'm not dismissing it. But there's another version, one that does not look like that at all. One that looks like being difficult to be around, like irritability, like getting into things you shouldn't, like a low-level rage that is always just underneath the surface, always looking for something to attach itself to. A major report from the JED Foundation, published last month, found that in young men, depression and anxiety almost never presented the way the poster says they should. They're presented as anger, irritability, frustration, risk-taking, the kind of behaviour that gets young men labelled a problem rather than a person who is struggling. I read that report and I thought, where was that 18 years ago? Because I was walking around with that for years and had no idea that's what it was. I genuinely believed I was just an angry person, that it was a character flaw, that something in me was broken. Nothing to do with anything that had happened to me, nothing underneath it, just how I was wired. And the best I could do was try to manage it so I didn't damage the people around me. That's what happens when nobody tells you what anger is actually trying to say. You spend years managing a symptom and never once looking at what it's a symptom of. I was 12 when it started. I do not remember the first time, the first comment, the first day, the thing that kicked it off. That's how these things go, I think. They don't start with a single moment, they accumulate. What I know is by the time I was 14, I was going to school maybe half the time. Some years less, up to 16 days off in a year most times. Not because I was sick, because I could not make myself walk back into a building where every single day someone was going to remind me in some way that I did not belong there. And the anger was there for all of it. Constant. This background heat that I could not turn off and I could not explain. I thought it was about them. The kids, the comments, the looks. And partly, yeah, I had a genuine reason to be angry. What was happening was genuinely unfair. But the anger didn't go away. When I wasn't at school, it came home with me. It sat at the dinner table, it lay down next to me at night. The anger came home with me every day. But at home, there was nowhere for it to go. My mum, my family, they hadn't done anything. They were innocent. So you keep it internal. You hold it down. Sometimes it sneaks through in a snide comment, and you feel bad about that too. But what you actually want, what the body is screaming for, is to take a baseball bat to the wall. Just to put it somewhere. Anywhere. But you can't do that either, because that would mean admitting there is a problem. It took me years to understand what was actually underneath it. When I finally did, when I had enough distance from it, and enough language for it, it felt less like anger and more like grief. Grief for the version of growing up I was not getting. Grief for the ease I could see in other people that I couldn't access no matter how hard I looked for it. Grief for a version of myself that felt like it was disappearing, a little bit at a time, under the weight of it. The anger was easier than that, Anger has edges, gives you something to push against. It feels like power when everything else feels like helplessness. That thing underneath it, the shapeless, heavy, relentless sadness that I did not have a name for, that had no edges at all. You cannot fight fog, so the body does what it can. It builds a fire instead. Here's what happens when nobody connects the behaviour to what's underneath it. The people around you respond to the anger. They manage it, walk on eggshells around it, confront it, or avoid it. Nobody asks what it's sitting on top of, because nobody taught them to ask that. Because nobody asked them that either. This is how this thing gets passed forward. Not from cruelty, just from not knowing. An unbroken chain of people who did not have the language. And so you walked around for years genuinely believing the story. That you were an angry person. That this is your character. That there's something fundamentally wrong with the way you are built. And all that time, the actual thing, the grief, the fear, the weight of whatever happened to produce this sits completely unseen. Gets no conversation, gets no room, because everyone around you is looking at the fire, not asking what started it. I carried that story for a long time. That it was just difficult. And did what those stories always do. It became part of how I saw myself, part of my identity, part of the structure. And then one day you start to ask, well, where did that story actually come from? Who decided that? Was there a moment where someone actually looked at me and tried to understand what was going on, rather than just responding to what was showing? For me, the answer was mostly no. And I did not say that with bitterness. The people around me were doing the best they could with what they had. But the cost of nobody asking, of years going by, with the underneath completely invisible, that's real. The cost is real, and I think it's worth naming. The anger was not the problem. It was the only thing that made sense when everything else hurt too much to sit with. I want you to sit with that for a second. The anger was not a character flaw. It was not evidence that something was fundamentally broken in you. It was a response, a very human, very understandable response to something was too heavy to hold directly. Your nervous system found the only exit it could. It built a fire because it did not know what else to do with all that weight. That's not weakness, that's survival. And it worked, in its way. It got you here. The question now is just, what is still protecting you from having to feel? So if you're watching this and something in it landed, if you recognize yourself in the anger and the heat that doesn't have a clear source, in the story you've been carrying about being a difficult person, I'm not going to tell you to go to therapy or download an app. I'm going to ask you one thing. What is underneath it? Not what caused the anger in the moment. What is the thing you haven't looked at directly? The thing the anger has been standing in front of all this time. Maybe it's grief, maybe it's fear, maybe it's something that happened to you you've never given yourself permission to name as something that happened to you. Maybe it's something you're not even sure has words yet. You don't have to answer that today. You don't have to answer that out loud. But I think the fact that you're asking the question at all, the fact that you watched this video, stayed with it, didn't click off when it got uncomfortable, that's already something. It's actually the beginning of something. For me, the answer took years, and it turned out the anger was doing a job, one that I did not know even needed doing. But that is a longer conversation. But it all started with asking the question. The kid who built the fire was doing the only thing he knew how to do. He was not a problem, he was a person doing his best with what he had. And so are you. Anger is not a home. You cannot live there permanently without it costing you something. Not the relationships, not the opportunities. All those things, yes, but it's mostly it costs you the chance to actually know what's going on inside you, which is the only thing that ever actually helps. I started this channel because I was in it, deep in it, and I built my way out. Not all at once, not cleanly, not without it being uncomfortable at points, but I did it. And the thing that made the difference, more than anything else, was someone eventually asking the right question. If you want to send me what's going on, not for advice, not for a plan, just to put it somewhere, there's a link below. I read every single one. Keep going. If this landed, drop a comment. Even just, I needed this. I read all of them. And if you want to send me what's going on with you, the link is below. No pitch, just a place to put it.